Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning with us. This is our last and final learning session of the year of 2020. What a year it has been. And it is our first virtual learning session. So if we have any little tech glitches, hang in there with us. It's a virtual kind of world. My name is Brateil Aghasi, and I'm so honored to be the CEO of WISEPlace. And we are so fortunate to once again have Dr. Snow join us today and really help us understand what are the contributing factors for homelessness, why does somebody experiencing homelessness, what factors contribute to homelessness. And he does just such a great job of taking the executive cost study that was published by our great partners, Orange County United Way and Jamboree Housing. And he does a great job of taking that very multi-page executive summary and kind of drilling it down to a few dozen slides. We can't wait for Dr. Snow to join us. But before we do that, I really hope that this morning just finds you and your family and your loved ones safe and healthy. There's so much going on in our community, and just know that your WISEPlace family is thinking of you and is here to support in any way that we can. I hope that you get 3 specific takeaways from this morning. So if you haven't had a chance to grab your cup of coffee, I have mine. We're going to learn together. But the 3 takeaways that I would love for you to gain from today's learning session is the one, Dr. Snow does such a great job of providing facts and data, and we will learn so much together. So that's number one. I hope that you are empowered and equipped with the data and the scientific evidence from his research, and that you will then know what is a myth versus what is reality. For example, myself, I've obviously heard Dr. Snow speak many times, but I didn't know, for example, I often hear in the community a myth that says, people move to Southern California and they experience homelessness, but they're not from here. Well, after I got to hear from Dr. Snow and learn about from the facts of his research, that actually wasn't true at all, that people experiencing homelessness in Orange County are overwhelmingly from Orange County. They're from this area. They're people that you and I went to high school with. They're people that lived and worked in our community. So that was, for me personally, something that was very empowering, because before I heard Dr. Snow talk, I didn't know what was a fact and what was a myth. But after hearing Dr. Snow talk, I was empowered from the data. So I hope that you have an opportunity to first and foremost learn about the data that is right here in our backyard. It's Orange County data and Orange County data alone that Dr. Snow will present. It isn't LA data, it isn't San Diego data, it's not national data, it is strictly right here in our backyard in Orange County. The second thing that I would hope to have your support in is advocacy. And advocacy can be a scary word, and sometimes people think, what is advocacy? What does that even mean? But I ask myself the question that I'll ask you. What is the purpose of learning about data and research if we can't apply it for something positive? And so that's the second thing that I hope you do, is that when you hear somebody talk about a myth in the community or on social media, that you engage in a conversation with somebody who maybe hasn't had the opportunity to hear Dr. Snow speak, and hasn't had the opportunity to learn about the differences between the facts and the myths about homelessness. And also, because there's so many conversations happening in our community all over Orange County right now. Most cities have housing meetings, even virtually right now, where you can show up virtually and or in person and glean your support, use your voice, right? Our voice can impact homelessness. in a positive way. Our voice is not something that we just have to use every 4 years in a presidential election, right? You can use your voice every day in the communities that you work and live in. And so I hope that after today, once you're equipped with the facts and the data and the knowledge, you use your voice and you advocate for things like affordable housing or permanent supportive housing in our community. And then the third takeaway I hope you get from this morning is how you can get involved with WISEPlace. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of Dr. Snow's presentation, and we'll talk a little bit more about specific ways you can support unaccompanied women experiencing homelessness by partnering with WISEPlace. And we have so many amazing virtual opportunities, and we have over 700 volunteers who have helped us and helped sustain us in 2020 alone. So I hope that you join our WISEPlace family. And if you're a volunteer, then maybe you'll learn about another volunteer opportunity as well. So I hope that you engage in your community with WISEPlace. And I think that, now more than ever with COVID-19, most of us feel a little isolated, and that's normal with what our county and nation is going through. But the good news is we have so many virtual opportunities where you can still make a difference right here in your backyard. So that's what I hope for us today. That's what I think you can expect today is those 3 takeaways. But before we talk a little bit more about WISEPlace and before we turn it over to the incredible and amazing Dr. David Snow, I'd like you to invite you to watch this video of a very special woman, a graduate of the WISEPlace program, Anne Marie.
My name is Anne Marie R. Lopez, and this is my journey. I wrote this to share with you. At age 71, I became homeless after living with a cousin. It was not working out, and I could not stay there anymore. I had nowhere to go. I was able to stay in my car in a garage. It was at the apartment of a friend. I was not supposed to be there. She took a risk because I had nowhere else to go. It was not great. I was so cold there. One Sunday at the Second Baptist Church, a kind lady told me about WISEPlace. I met with the case manager at WISEPlace, and I was so happy I got into the shelter. At least I had somewhere to sleep in the night. The things I learned at WISEPlace shelter was amazing. It was wonderful to be there. I had counseling, I got financial advice. They helped me learn about housing. I learned how to take care of my health. WISEPlace showed me how to prepare for my tax advisor. I learned computer knowledge from a wonderful volunteer. WISEPlace helped me with my job search. I was provided shelter for 2 years. For 2 years, I was not cold. For 2 years, I was safe. When I moved out of WISEPlace shelter, I was employed part-time working as caregiver for the elderly. I was able to get part-time work and start to save money to pay my own rent. I have lived in this senior apartment in my own home since 2018. I have not been homeless for 2 years. So I try to get everything organized. At times I'm not organized at all, and that confuses me. Yeah, so I just fold them up like this and put them in here. this big one. I try to keep everything organized, like this. I have my tops, my sleeping clothes here, my little washcloths here. Here I have my underclothes. And here I have my medication, all packed up here.
That's a beautiful photo. So he was an entertainer?
My husband, he was a musician. He played different instruments in his music band. He had 2 music bands and used to play more Spanish music. Well, that's what he's from. He was from Mexican parentage, but he was born in Bisbee, Arizona. Sure, the little ones, infants. Yeah. I miss all of them. Oh, God bless them. And these are my Bibles. I have a whole 10 of them. I had to give away some. You want any? Unfortunately, during COVID-19, I was not able to work. I got laid off. It was a struggle to pay my rent and bills. WISEPlace was there for me again and helped me with financial assistance so that I would not become homeless again because of COVID-19. I was supposed to find a new part-time job, and I am working again. I like to work. I am now 75 years old. I have made a secret promise to myself. I promised myself that you have to make it. I learned you just have to be steady and focus on your goals. Sometimes I slip up and forget. I think, oops, I slip up there. Then I remember the things I learned at WISEPlace. I am grateful for WISEPlace cheering me on and providing support and resources. I lived at home and I'm supported. I'm grateful for you for making this possible. Thank you for supporting WISEPlace so that WISEPlace could walk with me on my journey. I love my journey. If you are ever having a hard time, please remember me and know that you made a positive impact in my life. I am housed and I am safe thanks to you. Thanks to God, the Almighty. Amen.
Anne Marie is such an amazing and special woman and a graduate of our program. And Anne Marie is one of the 8,100 unaccompanied women positively impacted by WISEPlace. I mean, imagine being Anne Marie, being a senior and being homeless, being a senior and not being widowed and not being able to afford housing and living in your car. I know that you are here and you want to learn about homelessness so that women like Anne Marie do not have to experience homelessness. You know, I've been the CEO of WISEPlace for coming up to 2 years now, and this experience is truly extremely humbling to be able to walk alongside women like Anne Marie. And I will truly never again take for granted a bed to sleep in, having access to clean water, nutritious, warm food, and just the safety of not having to live on the streets as a female. And with COVID-19, you know, now more than ever, housing and support are needed. And at WISEPlace, we can do so much more, but we need your help. So, at WISEPlace, we really do have the expertise and the experience to tackle these very urgent and very critical housing and healthcare related needs. For more than 90 years, WISEPlace has served one of the largest overlooked and underserved populations in our community and across the nation, and that is unaccompanied women. And unaccompanied women is simply WISEPlace's way of saying a single adult female that is without a partner or children. So essentially a single adult female who would be alone and on the streets if it were not for your support of WISEPlace. The stats change a bit, but it used to be said that 1 in every 4 homeless adults was an unaccompanied woman, but unfortunately, homelessness is increasing, especially for senior women over the age of 62. So now it is said that 1 in every 3 homeless adults is an unaccompanied woman, like Anne Marie, who you met in the video. And at WISEPlace, we are so proud and honored to walk alongside unaccompanied women so they do not face adversity alone. We are the only nonprofit in all of Orange County that is specifically focused and solely focused on the very specific needs that unaccompanied women face and the barriers that unaccompanied women face in our community. And thanks to your support, 75% of the women we serve at WISEPlace transition after they've gone through our program, transition into their own permanent, stable housing, and their homelessness ends. Our programs work, and they work truly because of your support. So thanks to you, we are able to pair housing solutions such as temporary emergency shelter or transitional shelter with very comprehensive wraparound services like case management, clinical therapy and counseling, financial and employment assistance, health and wellness to support. And those are really just to name a few. And with your help, again, this is truly just our beginning. Your support is truly the key to ending homelessness right here in our backyard in Orange County. So now that you know a bit more about WISEPlace, we are so honored to bring in Dr. David Snow, and he's going to talk to us about his research and his scientific data and evidence about homelessness. If you have questions throughout Dr. Snow's presentation, I invite you to write your questions in the chat, or you can send them through Messenger if you feel more comfortable doing that. We already have a few questions in our Messenger. So feel free to grab another cup of coffee, get out a paper and pen if you like. But Dr. Snow does such a wonderful job of, kind of shedding light on the data and the evidence about homelessness. And then after Dr. Snow, we're going to open it up for some Q&A, and then we'll talk about ways that you could support women facing homelessness throughout the holidays with WISEPlace. So without further ado, I will welcome Dr. David Snow.
Streets. And good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Snow, a retired professor at UCI. And what I'd like to do today is talk about women in homelessness in Orange County and focusing on some key characteristics and causes of their homelessness and some of the challenges that they are confronted with and the costs. The data for this study was conducted with one of my colleagues, Dr. Rachel Goldberg, with the support of various agencies within Orange County. What I want to focus on are 5 questions. What is homelessness? Who do we count as being homeless? Who are the homeless? What are their demographic characteristics? What are the causes of homelessness? Why some folks and not others? What are the challenges of living on the streets? How do the literal homeless make do and survive? And finally, what is the cost of homelessness to the enveloping municipality? How does the cost vary in comparison to different types of housing alternatives for the homeless? So let's take first the question of who gets counted as homeless. And what I have are a list of a range of possibilities, all of which include people who are often counted as homeless. When we talk about the literal homeless, and those that you are most likely to see, these are people living and sleeping in public places not intended for human habitation. So you see them on the sidewalks, under bridges, abandoned buildings, maybe parks, and so on. Then there are the homeless sleeping in shelters. Also, a good many homeless living in vehicles, and the number of folks living in vehicles have probably increased quite significantly during the pandemic. Then there are folks who are evicted from their homes, discharged from institutions like hospitals or prison, or who are fleeing domestic violence. These are the groups that are the government, the federal government counts as homeless, the Housing and Urban Development definition of homeless. For us, in our research, we used a little broader definition because we wanted to compare the characteristics and the cost of those who are living in shelters or literally homeless with those who are living in transitional or supportive housing. So as a consequence, our conception for our research is a little broader. And then there are people that really don't get counted as homeless in the US, nor in other places, who live in unserviced, makeshift, substandard housing. Our 10 cities would qualify for that, but they don't, they're not left standing very long. Maybe the most common example are the favelas that you see on the hillsides in Rio de Janeiro and in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Then we have the refugee and disaster victims and itinerary groups and people who have taken over vacated housing and squat in them. So all of these groups can be considered homeless, or at least at the risk of homelessness. Now, a few things about our study and comparing cost or trying to get at the cost. We wanted to look at the different institutions and where the costs are accrued. So we tried to gather data from the 34 municipalities in the county, hospitals with ERs, non-governmental agencies, of which there are really a good many, and the county as a whole. And that would give us a cost, but we wanted to know how these costs varied, of course, to whether people were sleeping on the street in shelters, in transitional or interim housing. So for example, for WISEPlace, its long-term housing has been transitional. Transitional usually means at least up to 6 months, and trying to get people kind of reacclimated to more standard housing, re-entering the labor market and the like. But for some time now, WISEPlace has also served as a shelter for homeless women, and they're interested and have their campaign to develop what's called permanent supportive housing, which is housing for the chronically homeless with several health conditions, and permanent supportive housing provides wraparound house care. So in due time, WISEPlace is providing several different kinds of housing. But anyway, we interviewed close to 300 homeless individuals, asking them a range of questions, such as, within the past 6 months or 30 days, have you used an emergency room? If they told us yes, and they've done it X number of times, knowing the average cost from emergency hospital emergency rooms, we could get an average cost per person. So that's how we proceeded to do the research. Let's turn to some of the characteristics of the homeless. And here we have a number of items looking at the demographic and biographic characteristics. The first one we see is 90% in our research were US born citizens. It's often the belief that a disproportionate number of the homeless in Southern California have recently crossed the border, but clearly that isn't the case, with 90% being US born citizens. Also, interestingly, 68% have lived in Orange County 10 years or longer, which flies in the face of another common stereotype that the homeless in Orange County are people who have just moved here recently to take advantage of the warmer weather and proximity to the ocean, which clearly that's not the case. We also see that the majority are male. In parentheses, the figures from the most recent point in time count, 2019 for Orange County. So it kind of shows the approximate number for the county, found 63% male. The difference is slight between our findings and the 2019 point in time. Probably the reason we have somewhat higher proportion of female is because we also, they're more likely to be housed in one of the housing types in which we did some surveys. 12% veterans, which is higher than for the county as a whole, and also higher than for the number of homeless veterans in the state of California, which is a little bit less than 10%. As with whites is a plurality, but you have 30% Latino, 15% Black, and this isn't that much different from the point in time estimates. One of the things that's interesting here is wherever you look in the country in terms of the distribution of the ethnic or racial distribution of the population, you find an overrepresentation of Black Americans. So Orange County population is about 1/3 Latinx. We found 30% Latinx homeless. African Americans in Orange County, only 2% of the population, but 15% of the homeless. So quite an overrepresentation. Another interesting finding is that, but maybe not surprising, is 67% live alone. Only 6% are married. That's contrast about 60% of the adult population. And only 17% live with children. We call those social capital deficits that the homeless suffer, and these are indications of them. A social capital deficit really refers to our social networks and people we can contact and maybe rely on in hard times. And you can kind of see, given the number alone unmarried, that this is a deficit in comparison to the house population. There's also what economists would call human capital deficits. Nearly 20% of those we interviewed had not completed high school. That's only in comparison to between 5 and 6% in Orange County. So that's a deficit. And 49% haven't worked for a regular paycheck for 5 years. Educational background, and work history really comprise the core of what's called human capital. And I want us to look at health deficits. You see here, second from the bottom, 45% of the homeless we interviewed indicated on a question, in response to a question that's standardized across the country, with respect to health. 45% indicated that their health is either fair to poor, in contrast to only 9% of the adult population in the country, and in contrast to 22% living in poverty. So you can see here that when we talk about homelessness, we're also talking about health medical problems. And finally, a high percentage indicating feeling some depression over the last 30 days. So these are some of the key characteristics of who our homeless residents are. What about the causes of homelessness in Orange County? When we think of causes of homelessness, it's important to think of the interaction, the intersection between two sets of factors. One are the structural antecedents or structural determinants of homelessness. And really we're talking about structural factors that limit accessibility to housing. And secondly, personal and biographic factors, which accentuate the vulnerability of some people being homeless more so than others. You see, I have in parentheses here the chairs and the homeless. You can kind of think of the game we've all played when we were younger, musical chairs. So the structural factors are what counts for the elimination of chairs or for insufficient number of housing. The biographic factors are those that tell us who's going to be left standing when the housing is limited. And in asking the homeless that we interviewed about these kind of factors, here's the structural antecedents. 40% indicated the problem of securing or retaining jobs with sustainable wages. And close to that, 36% finding or retaining affordable housing. Now, in the survey, they could mention more than one factor, but these were the two factors that were mentioned most frequently, structural factors. Again, structural factors are factors that the individuals are not responsible for or have any connection to, but which impinge on them in terms of whether they can find housing or not. And then there are the biographic factors determining kind of who's left standing. As you can see, 28% indicated family issues, and we'll come back to that. 22% talked about substance issues, 17% mental health, 13% physical health, and 7% mentioned being released recently from prison or jail. Going back to the structural factors, this just provides a glimpse, but this is a graph based on median rent in the county from 2000 to 2014 and median renter income. And what you see over this period from 2000 to 2014, you have an increase in annual median rent moving up towards 4,000, while a decrease in actual purchasing power, median renter income, I should say, by more than 5,000. And when this gap widens, the probability of a significant increase in homelessness increases. So you could say that homelessness grows or declines with the growth or decline in these two slopes. And just to show some of this a little bit more clearly, people often like to, well, it's this factor, that factor, but it's actually an interaction of factors. So this shows how these different factors I mentioned interact for the women we interviewed. So here you can see this is for the largest sector. 74% indicated lack of affordable housing and job loss. And then you can see here, these two lines in red indicate that. Other factors are present, but these are the two dominant ones. Then if you go to the second cluster, it's all domestic violence, and that's 21%. And then you have a much smaller factor, cluster 3, where the two dominant factors are alcohol and drugs. I mean, again, this is interesting because people are likely to think stereotypically that the reason most of the people are homeless because of substance issues. No question, some are, but that's not the driving factor for most of them. Again, for 74, nearly 3/4 of the women, it's lack of affordable housing and job loss. To drill down a little bit more with respect to biographic factors, this chart here shows the incidence of abuse during childhood. And what's interesting, the orange is for females. And if you say you physical abuse only, sexual abuse only, or both, you combine all three and you're up to around 40% of the women we interviewed were victims of physical or sexual abuse in some combination, or one or the other by themselves during childhood. And even when you combine men and women in the yellow, it's 30%, which is kind of astounding. And what it really underscores is the traumatic experience of abuse and how that can create vulnerabilities to other stages or paths in one's social life. This even accents it a bit more. You can see here, as I said, the 40% who experience physical or sexual abuse during childhood for women. But down here, this 58% is really interesting because this is the percent of women who reported abuse as child and also cited domestic violence as a reason for their homelessness. So you have nearly 60% of the women we encountered had been victims of child abuse plus domestic abuse as an adult. A couple other factors, if you look here, particularly in the case of women, 46% had a parent or other adult household member with alcohol or drugs problems when growing up. Nearly 20% a family member who spent at least a night homeless when growing up. 33% who had non-parental relatives responsible for their care or lived in, with foster parents or an orphanage, and 7% in a correctional facility. Again, ask yourselves, how many people do you know in your family that have had these childhood experiences? So what are some of the challenges of living on the street? Well, first of all, and it's interesting that we go over these, ask yourself if during the last months or so, you've had these challenges. Trouble getting things done because of alcohol or drugs. Men are accented here because I think in all of these categories they're higher. Find it difficult or very difficult to find a safe place to sleep. Find it difficult to find a place to wash or shower, to get clean clothes, to find a toilet, and to feel good about yourself. Again, asking yourself these same kind of questions or those within your family, and you begin to get a sense of the challenges of living on the street. Also interesting in this regard about social relations, percent living with a spouse or a romantic partner, double the case for women than for men, and that's not surprising. If women are actually living on the street, hooking up, if you will, or connecting with a man is often a source of protection. Living with children, much higher among women. Neither men or women live much with other family members, not much with friends. People that they can talk to or count on. For women, around 44% say one or two friends, and you can see how it varies. But again, that's an interesting question to ask ourselves about how many friends we can talk to and count on. And you find a higher proportion of women living with a pet, which is interesting, but again, maybe not surprising. Here, the how one health not just fluctuate, but worsens the longer they're on the street. So the first bar here, for those who've been on the street for less than a year, 50% say they haven't had any health conditions. But you can see as you go up to 3+ years, how that number declines quite significantly across that period. On the other hand, if you look at the yellow here, you can see how the proportion with 3 or more conditions increases quite dramatically and more than doubles if you've been on the street for 3 or more years. Again, underscoring the connection between serious health problems and homelessness. Another factor homeless are confronted with on the streets is victimization. Here you can see 32% of the women were often verbally harassed while homeless, oftentimes by other homeless. 11% slap, punch, or kicked while homeless. And sometimes it may have been by a partner. Pretty similar here in terms of the percentage who had things stolen from them, and not a huge percentage who had threat of violence while homeless. But again, these are not conditions that we're normally confronted with on a regular basis when we're housed. Another indicator of experience of living on the street. For men, they were ticketed per year average of about 5 times per head. Women, less. Times appeared in court. Women do somewhat better in showing up when they're, basically it's showing up to homeless court. Times arrested, again, for men, about 3 times greater rate of arrest than for women. Men also spent more times in jail. Now, those experiences are relevant to what we can call a vicious circle. So for the street homeless, when we think of why it's difficult for them sometimes, most of the time. So how do they meet their basic needs? They do it in public. It may be sleeping, it may be elimination, it may be going through dumpsters to find food or stuff to sell. Those behaviors are criminalized. They can't pay the fines because of poverty, which they're fined going to homeless court or they go to jail. They're back out on the street and the cycle continues. So the question of income, or how do they make do materially while on the streets? And here are different sources. In the one you can see that the homeless use most frequently are food stamps, with women using food stamps most frequently, followed by shadow work. And by shadow work, I mean work that exists in the shadow of what we think of as regular work. but it could be panhandling on a street corner. It could be selling cans, throwaway cans, plastic, cardboard. It could be selling stuff at a open market that they get out of dumpsters. It could be prostitution, in some cases is. It could be small drug dealing, in some cases it is. It could be selling plasma. All of these different things we think of shadow work, and no one homeless person relies on any of them. What they typically do is cobble them together with some of these other factors. A lower number on employment, on Social Security, disability, then not much from family and friends, general assistance, and Social Security down here. Some do get Social Security. I met a woman at the interviewed at the Newport Beach Transit Center. Then a Saturday morning, and she was on her way down to, I believe it was Dana Point. I asked her where she slept last night, and she said, "Oh, where I usually sleep, on a bench in Anaheim." And why was she was going to Dana Point? She said, "Well, I get $1,000 a month from Social Security. Clearly, that's not enough to enter housing in Orange County or feed oneself." So she said what she does with that $1,000 is on weekends she goes to a cheap motel, showers, washes her clothes, gets a couple of good nights sleep, and she'll ride the bus someplace. And wherever she goes, she knows where she can get a decent meal at a pretty good price. And that's how she survives on the streets. But she relies on Social Security, but clearly not too many. And it may well is the case that many more have Social Security they could draw on, but they may not have filed for it or are not connected to some drop-in mail center where they can receive their payments. So when you look at the earnings, how does it all add up? I just note that the rapid rehousing, as you move from the street and the shelters to these other different types of housing, you see an increase here, at least through transitional housing and rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing is basically for families, typically it's women and children, but who have recently come on hard times. One or both of the parents were employed, not employed, but what it does is rapidly or quickly tries to get them back into the labor market. And so you could see they end up working and have to pay for a portion of their rent. And you can see that in terms of the median earnings down here. In contrast to the median earnings for folks in the other sectors for types of housing, $500 for the homeless on the street. So, which again, likely to come together from the cobbling of shadow work strategy they engage in, maybe with some small change from family or friends. So with that as background in terms of the kind of the challenges of living on the street, what's the cost of homelessness in Orange County? And here earlier we indicated we received data from the 34 municipalities, or 21 of them, and then did some statistical imputation for the other 13, from hospitals, from the county, and from housing agencies. And the the overall estimate was $300 million a year. And at that time, it was close to 5,000 homeless in the county. And I'd say that's a conservative estimate because there were other agencies which we did not have clear-cut reporting from, and we did not get the range of data we would have liked from law enforcement. When we broke it down by different clusters, you could see, again, I've mentioned several times the importance of health and medical factors. The most expensive was the healthcare cluster. Close to that, but yet less was the housing cluster, and here's the law enforcement cluster. And law enforcement probably is close to double that. But as I said, there were some data points where we weren't able to access. Now, what this shows here, okay, on average, what's the cost per person per year? And it varies considerably whether the person is chronically homeless or not. And the chronically homeless, I mentioned before, those who have been on the streets for a year or more and have probably 2 or more health issues, disabilities. And so you can see the variation there between those two, about 60,000 more for the chronic homeless. So let's make an hypothesis here that we can examine. A number of years ago, the philosophy in terms of dealing with the homeless was to attend to their so-called disabilities. If it was substance abuse or mental illness or physical health problems before you housed them. And then HUD and the government in general under George W. Bush came to the realization that, you know, putting people in housing may help them in a multitude of ways. So why don't we start there and provide stable housing and in some cases, case management. So the hypothesis is if you put people in housing, the number of hospital visits will decline, the contact with law enforcement will decline, the time in the street will decline, and the cost of homelessness will decline. So taking that, what did we define? What did we find? So if the average cost per person who are non-chronically homeless at $42,000, when you put them into housing with support services, it's around, you know, a little bit, let's round it off at $10,000 a year, a considerable difference. And what about for the chronic homeless? You take them at around $100,000 a year and put them in housing with support services, particularly permanent supportive housing, and you're down to rounding off around $50,000 a year. So a considerable savings. And this is for social services and support, not for the cost of building the housing from scratch. So here are the couple of key points. Cost for services for those who are chronically homeless, 50% lower per person for the chronic homeless. And consistent with the hypothesis earlier, we found 78% fewer ambulance rides, 100% fewer ticketed, I say ticket, by police, and thus police encounters, and 100% fewer arrests. All of this adds up to considerable savings. And just one last thing, for the upper 10% of the chronic homeless, so the most severely impaired medically, the upper 10%, average cost of $440,000 a year per person. You put them in permanent supportive housing, and it's around $55,000 a year. Again, a very considerable savings. So what are the major takeaways here? One, when we talk about homelessness, we're talking about people who find themselves in certain kinds of social situations, a social condition rather than a social type. You know, there are people without housing, and it can be a variety of people that find themselves in that kind of condition. The primary cause for both men and women is the gap between the cost of rental housing and the availability of living wages to access that housing. I mean, a case in point is, you know, a number of people who employed at Disney when it is open live in trailers or in cars because of the differential between their wages and the cost of housing, rental housing. So homeless are generally people for whom there are no available or accessible housing slots because of the intersection of structural and personal and biographic vulnerabilities. And while there's some interesting differences in these demographic and biographic and street experiences of homeless men and women, there are also many similarities, which is to say they're confronted with many of the same challenges. We know from the cost study that the cost of homelessness decreases quite significantly with the provision of housing, and that this cost reduction is most pronounced for the chronic homeless. And this is true for both homeless women and men. We also know that many of the troublesome issues associated with homelessness disappear or decline markedly with the provision of housing. So I guess let me leave you with this question: why not housing now? And I'll stop there and turn it over to Brateil, who would probably like to entertain some questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snow. We are always so humbled when you take time to join us, and you're such a special member of our WISEPlace family. Thank you so much. I know that we could see it in our messenger and in our chat. People have learned so much, and I will never forget the first time I got to hear you speak at our first learning session in January of 2019. And you really kind of make the statistics real. So thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so, and I apologize, I'm looking at the chat and I'm looking at Messenger. So we have a few questions. And, you know, you can always continue to put them in the chat, continue to put them in Messenger. But when we wrap up today's live learning session, feel free to email our organization. I have a hard name, so I'm not even going to give out my email because it's not easy, but you can go on our website, wiseplace.org. So again, we're not a .com, we're a local grassroots nonprofit organization, wiseplace.org. And you have our staff roster if you'd like to email me and continue the conversation. My email is there, but an easier email is info@wiseplace.org or volunteers@wiseplace.org. And then, of course, our website is a great way to kind of stay in touch with us. And we have newsletters that we send out once a month, and of course, our social media. So like us, follow us, do all the things that we can do for social media and stay in contact with us. So I'm going to go to what came in as our first question. And that is from, let's see, Natasha. Thank you for your question, Natasha. Natasha asks, can you explain what an unaccompanied woman is again? And yes, I can. And thank you for that question, Natasha. So an unaccompanied woman for WISEPlace is a single adult woman, just to oversimplify. So at WISEPlace, we specialize and solely focus on unaccompanied women. For WISEPlace, that is an adult woman, so a woman that is 18 and over. Last year in 2019, we had several participants, shelter participants who were 18, 19, And then we had a woman who was 87 years old. And then in 2018, we had a woman that was 92 years old in our shelter that we helped place in senior housing. So we serve adult single women. Now, I want to add a layer to that, Natasha. So some of the women in the shelter, probably about 30%, have children. But their children, for various reasons, are not with them when they are at our shelter. So at our shelter, at WISEPlace, we don't have children. WISEPlace is, our organization is a place for women to really come and be able to have the time and the support to focus on themselves. Augusta is somebody who comes to mind. Augusta is an alumni graduate of ours. We have her story on our website. Augusta had 3 little children at the time, and they were living in their car. And their car was getting broken into, and it just wasn't a safe environment for Augusta and her 3 little children. So Augusta knew, she knew that she didn't want to live in her car. She knew that her and her children were not safe. So when Augusta came to WISEPlace, she leaned on family that she trusted, and her family took in her 3 children. And Augusta was with us at WISEPlace and went through all the counseling services to work through the trauma that was affecting her life. We helped Augusta get and keep a job. Augusta started to save money. She went through all of our programs and workshops. And then Augusta's homelessness ended after about a year and a half with WISEPlace, and we helped her find an apartment. She had gone through our program. She had saved money. We had helped her budget and finance, so we knew that she could sustain her housing. So Augusta then, we helped her move into her own apartment. The founding members of the Hope and Housing Alliance helped provide that $1,200 first month's rent and deposit, because the first month when you move out, when you're homeless, you don't have a bed, you don't have kitchenware, you don't have housewares, and the first month is exceptionally expensive when you move into your own apartment. So we helped provide those additional resources for Augusta. And then when Augusta moved out, she was able to reunite with her 3 children. Right. So that's kind of a layer of what is an accompanied woman. Again, it is when a woman is at WISEPlace, her children are not with her if she has children. So she's able to really focus on herself and making a lasting positive change for her and her family. So that's one example, is like Augusta. But again, the majority of women, 70% of women, are single. They do not have children, and they do not have a partner. And then the last thing I would just add to that, Natasha, is that, at WISEPlace, we take a lot of pride in being the only organization in Orange County that solely focuses on unaccompanied women. And it's important because the needs of unaccompanied women are different than men, are different than women with families. And so, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There's many solutions to end homelessness. And so we really focus on unaccompanied women because they are, unfortunately, such an underrepresented but large segment of the population. And with seniors experiencing homelessness more and more, that's why it is our focus and our specialty. And there's also things that make women, single women, especially vulnerable when they are on the streets. And there is, gender-based violence that happens to single women. So I hope that answers your question, Natasha. Thank you for the great question. Let's see here. I'm scrolling through the comments. Let's see. So Marcy is asking, what can volunteers do? How can I help during the holidays? So Marcy, thanks for your question. There are so many things that you can do during the holidays or just every day. Our shelter is open every day of the year. We are open at 2 a.m., we're open at 4 a.m., we're open during traditional office hours. our shelter is open 24/7, 365 days of the year. So we need a lot of help. We typically serve over 300 women every year. And so for the holidays, you can visit our website. We like to think we've made it pretty easy. We have these Amazon wish lists that right now for the holidays, gift cards would be incredibly helpful and impactful. The gift cards would go directly to the women. And we're very practical. So we're asking for things like robes, the kind of fuzzy and warm robes because it's cold now, fuzzy socks. We have like slippers, things that you and I would want for the holidays as well. Our ladies would love to have. So you can shop specifically on our website. We have a tab that's all about volunteering and remote volunteering. So you can coordinate your own drive. What you could do is take that link and share it with your faith-based group, with your alumni, with your high school, college, with your Girl Scouts troop, at your corporate office. It's very easy to share the link, and you can, behind the safe computer, you can shop online, and the packages actually come directly to WISEPlace, so you don't have to drop them off. However, if you would like to coordinate a drive and you'd like to bring them to WISEPlace, we are in the beautiful city of Santa Ana, and we will be able to coordinate with you a contactless and safe drop-off as well. We also have a breakfast wish list, things like coffee, creamer. We serve over 69,000 meals a year at WISEPlace. For the women experiencing homelessness in our community. So if you'd like to help purchase like breakfast items off our essential wish list, that's an easy way to get involved throughout the year or during the holidays. Also, if you'd like to email us, again, volunteers@wiseplace.org or info@wiseplace.org. A meal sponsorship, so a warm meal like lunch or dinner, can be provided through pretty nominal sponsorship of $350 to $500. Some people like to bake cookies. Some people like to provide the financial support. And then we have many, many incredible partners who give us kind of low cost, very warm, nutritious meals. So those are the most popular ways to get involved for the holidays. But if you have a group in your group, we would love to hear you. Also, we just launched an initiative called the Hope and Housing Alliance, and you can find that on our website, wiseplace.org. And the Hope and Housing Alliance just launched about a month ago. So if you joined, you would become a founding member. And they're financial contributions that directly impact the life of a woman experiencing homelessness. And so you can even do them monthly. So an example is to be the Silver Key member, which is a donation of $1,200 a year, but you can break that up in $100 increments. So $100 every month for 1 year helps end the homelessness of one woman by supporting her first month's rent and deposit. So again, lots of ways to get involved, and we would love to hear from you, and please feel free to visit our website. So let me see here. Yes, thank you for the questions. We will share the links to all of our wish lists and our wiseplace.org, and it is just a click of a button to get involved. And let's see here. Natasha has a great follow-up question. What would be the most impactful policy change that we could advocate for locally or nationally? Natasha, that is an incredible question. And I think the answer to that is strictly housing. And so Dr. Snow, when he wrapped up his presentation, after presenting all of his great research, he asked, why not housing? Why not now? And so I think that is the answer to your question, Natasha. The way to end homelessness is actually incredibly easy if we think about it. The way to end homelessness is through homes, right? There is kind of immediate safety for somebody. And housing, you still need wraparound services. So you still need the clinical support, the case management, the financial empowerment, all of the wraparound services that we provide at WISEPlace. But the first step should be shelter. Shelter should lead to housing. And so not only is it the right thing to do, but as you saw in Dr. Snow's presentation, it actually makes a lot of business sense. So we can think that not doing anything doesn't cost us anything, but it actually does. It costs over $100,000, as Dr. Snow's data showed us. So, we want to take action, and the way to do that is to not keep putting band-aids on the problem, but go to the root of the problem, which is there is a lack of affordable housing in our community and across the nation, and we need to tackle that. Okay, so sorry, I'm multitasking, everybody. So I think I answered all the questions. If I missed any, I don't think I did, but again, I hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation. Homelessness doesn't pause for a pandemic, and neither does WISEPlace. And so we are poised to do even more. Our team is ready to serve the community, and we just can't do it without you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your morning with us and learning about the actual data that is right here in our backyard. And thank you for being an advocate. I hope that you share what you learned with your friends, with your family, with your community. And I hope that you sign up for our newsletters, that you engage with us on social media, and that we hear from you because we need your help. And this is a solvable problem. I know it seems at times incredibly overwhelming, but I see change every day at WISEPlace. I see homelessness end every day at WISEPlace. And we just can't do it without your help. So have a fantastic rest of your Saturday, and wiseplace.org to get more involved. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.